I was engaged in a discussion just of recent, and somebody asked me this particular question. If you are given an opportunity today to regulate and change the things that are happening in the world today, what will you do first? I told him that the first thing I'm going to do is to dissolve the United Nations organization. And it baffled them. And they asked me why. Because to them, they believe that the United Nations is solving a lot of trouble in the world, according to their argument. Because my answer caused a lot of argument and debate. And during our discussion, I told them a lot of things concerning the United Nations. And they believe in me, and I did it necessary to share with us here on my platform, TFA Talking Point. The United Nations was created in 1945 to replace the League of Nations because of the failure of the League of Nations. And the United Nations was created with one objective: to prevent another war from happening and to maintain peace all over the world. And then the main objective of the United Nations was to prevent, that is the main objective of the United Nations, to prevent any societal evil happening that can happen here on earth. Meaning, if it is illness, if it is hunger, poverty, unemployment, illiteracies, and many other things. And that is why the United Nations is having a lot of branches and departments, and also to prevent conflict. And then the main big way for them to prevent all these things was to maybe involving and intervening in problems at the early stage, meaning not waiting for it to become a problem before struggling to cure that particular problem, but struggling by all possible means to prevent it from occurring. Meaning things like a civil war, like what's happening between Ukraine and Russia, what is happening in Afghanistan, Pakistan, in Syria, and in other parts of the world. It was their place to prevent all these things, meaning monitoring the activities of many nations in order to stop them from engaging in civil war, from engaging in problems that can cause a civil war and other things, hunger, poverty, and many other things. And when I talk about demanding for the United Nations to be dissolved, it is mainly because this organization has been for more than 60, 70 years without any positive result or without anything that they have done concretely that we can stand and proud of, that this conflict in this particular place was stopped or it did not occur because of the United Nations. The United Nations has indirectly turned from an objective and becomes a humanitarian organization, moving from one place to another, helping people who are in need. We have a lot of humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross all over the world, Caritas, and many others that are helping in that domain. Why would the United Nations abandon its own objective and its own aim in order to be involving in things that it was not created for? Look at what is happening in Ukraine. Putin did not just get up one day and decided to invade Ukraine. He started talking about it treachery. And the big nations all over the world, the United States of America, European nations, and many others, it started threatening and saying that if you do this, we are going to intervene. And they gave all that courage and all that confidence to the president of Ukraine. And he and the people of Ukraine went into fighting, believing that all these powerful nations will help them with soldiers or will come and fight on their behalf. And the United Nations at this point did not even care to go to Putin or to call for all these big nations and say, okay, let's go to this man and talk, or to engage these two people together in a dialogue or in a negotiation in which it could have prevented this thing from happening. Today, a whole nation has been deserted. Millions of people have been killed and millions have been displaced. I also take one example, what is happening in Cameroon, the Anglophone crisis called the Ambazonia crisis. It started in 2016, and all the people of southern Cameroon were asking for. If you ask even an old woman in the village, they were saying that when the United Nations will hear, when the United Nations will come, they will help us. Their hope was in the United Nations. And if the United Nations could have intervened in 2017, what is happening today in Southern Cameroon would have. The killing, more than 8,000 people have been killed. More than 300 villages have been burnt down. And millions of people displaced. Some are living in the forest like elements. And the United Nations is now looking for ways in order to help those who have been displaced and those who are hungry. And from their report, they say that more than 8 million Southern Cameroonians are in need of food. This is a problem that could have been prevented by the United Nations, but they failed. These are just some few examples of what is happening all over the world, in Sudan, in Somalia, in Ethiopia, in Afghanistan, in Pakistan, in whatsoever part of the world, in Israel. The United Nations is aware of it. But all we are hearing, the voiceless people are hearing it from United Nations is we condemn. United Nations was not created to be condemning. The United Nations was created to prevent, not condemning the things from happening. That is what I'm calling up and saying that the United Nations need to be dissolved. The second point, and I'm holding on for the United Nations to be dissolved, is in 2015, the United Nations created or established the United Nations Sustainable Development Goal in order to eradicate poverty, in order to eradicate hunger and illiteracy and many other things in the world. And this Sustainable Development Goal has not gone anywhere. Many people today are hungry. Many people today are in poverty. Many people are falling below the poverty line. And the United Nations have turned into helping and curing. United Nations was not created to be curing things. United Nations was created to prevent. And then the only way to prevent hunger is for the United Nations to create plantation and agricultural related industry. I have written this to the United Nations many times through their email. United Nations was not created to be curing poverty and helping people who are in poverty. The United Nations was created to eradicate poverty, to prevent it from happening. If big nations and powerful leaders and leaders are stealing and embezzling the taxpayer money, it's a place for the United Nations to intervene, not pushing many nations into poverty and into borrowing. And many are now entangled within the International Monetary Fund. If you look also in with what is happening, what happened during the coronavirus, which is still going on and killing many people. Millions of people died because of coronavirus. And the World Health Organization was in existence. They did not do anything to prevent the coronavirus from spreading all over the world. And the World Health Organization is the department of the United Nations. They did not do anything. They allowed it to spread all over the world. And then they were waiting to examine and do whatsoever they are talking. Thirdly, after the International Criminal Court issued a warrant of arrest for Putin, I was also surprised when they say Russia is not a member of the International Criminal Court. United States of America is not a member. China is not a member. Britain is not a member. And all these people are the permanent member of the Security Council. They contributed, they all created the International Criminal Court, but decided that they will not be members of this criminal court because they know the objective. Meaning, the United Nations is not an organization that can help anybody in this world because the United Nations has been hijacked by powerful nations, and they are manipulating and controlling all the activities and the affairs. United Nations were created to weaken poor nations so that they will remain poor and weak, so that the big nations will be manipulating and using them for their own political gains, for their own economic benefit and whatsoever benefits they want to. And that is what I'm demanding for this organization to be dissolved, because the organization has failed mankind, has failed humanity. All the calamity today happening in the world is all because of the failure of the United Nations. They have failed to maintain peace in Africa, peace in Asia, peace in America, peace in Europe. They have failed to eradicate hunger. The United Nations has failed to eradicate poverty. The United Nations has failed to eradicate diseases, viruses, and many other things. Malaria today has been for many years in Africa, killing millions of people. Yet there is no malaria in Europe and in other parts of the world, in developed countries. What are the things they are using? They use in order to eradicate malaria in all these parts of the world. Why can they not use that particular method in Africa? But the United Nations turned into a business center. That is the main reason. There's a lot about the United Nations that if I'm given the opportunity to address the United Nations, I'm going to address the United Nations, and the United Nations will be dissolved immediately.